On Christmas Eve, my husband said, "She'll be staying tonight." I looked at him and asked, "Staying where?" "In our home," he replied, without hesitation. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. The words didn't feel real. Not in that room. Not with the tree still glowing in the corner, the table set for dinner, the scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon still lingering in the air. Everything looked exactly the way it always had on Christmas Eve. Warm, careful, familiar. Except for him. Except for the young woman standing just behind his shoulder, her coat still on, her hand resting lightly on the back of one of my dining chairs, as if she already belonged there. I didn't recognize her. But the way she stood, the way she didn't look surprised, told me everything I needed to know. I turned back to my husband. "Who is she?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. He exhaled, slow, almost annoyed, as if I were asking something inconvenient. Something obvious. "She's someone important to me," he said. "Someone important." I repeated those words silently in my head. They didn't land. They just hovered there, hollow and useless. "I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end of my story, and tell me where you're watching from." I always wonder how far a story like this can travel. Because that night, the night everything ended, didn't begin the way you might expect. It began like every Christmas Eve I had spent for the past 42 years. I woke up early that morning, before the sun had fully risen. The house was quiet. Still, the kind of quiet that used to feel peaceful. That day, it felt heavier somehow. I remember standing in the kitchen, holding my coffee, staring out at the yard as the first layer of snow settled over the grass. Everything looked untouched, clean. I told myself it was going to be a good day. I always did. I spent the morning the way I always had. I took out the good dishes, the ones we only used on holidays. I polished the silverware. I laid the table carefully, making sure every plate was aligned, every glass placed just right. 8 settings. Even though there were only supposed to be 3 of us that year. Old habits don't disappear easily. I decorated the tree a week earlier, but that morning I adjusted a few ornaments. Straightened the lights. Smoothed out the skirt at the bottom. Small things. Meaningless, maybe, but they mattered to me. They always had. By noon, I started cooking. Turkey in the oven. Potatoes on the stove. The smell filled the house slowly, wrapping around the walls, settling into the furniture. It was the kind of smell that used to bring him into the kitchen, asking if he could sneak a taste. That day, he didn't come. He stayed in the living room. On his phone. I noticed it, of course. The distance. It hadn't started that day. If I'm being honest, it had been building for months. Maybe longer. At first, it was small things. He stopped asking about dinner. Stopped sitting at the table until I called him twice. Stopped finishing conversations. Then it became other things. Late nights. Short answers. A new cologne I didn't recognize. I remember the first time I noticed that scent. It lingered on his coat when he came home one evening. I asked him about it casually. He said it was from a coworker. Someone had sprayed too much in the office. I nodded. I didn't ask again. Not because I believed him, but because I didn't want to hear what might come next. By late afternoon, the snow had started falling harder. Thick, steady, the kind that quiets everything. I set the table one last time. Lit the candles. Turned on the soft music we always played on Christmas Eve. For a moment, just a moment, it almost felt like nothing had changed. He finally came into the dining room. He looked at the table, at the food, at the candles. "You didn't have to do all this," he said. His voice was flat, not unkind, just distant. "I wanted to," I replied. He nodded, didn't smile. Then he checked his watch. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not broke, not yet, but shifted. Because I realized he wasn't waiting to sit down. He was waiting for someone else. The doorbell rang at exactly 6:12 p.m. I remember the time because I looked at the clock without thinking. It was something I used to do when guests arrived. Just a habit. He moved before I did. Quickly. Too quickly. He opened the door. Himself. And when I stepped into the hallway, I saw her. Young. That's the first thing I noticed. Not beautiful, not elegant, not anything extraordinary. Just young. Her hair fell over her shoulders in loose waves. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold. Snow clung to the edges of her boots. She smiled when she saw him. Not politely. Not like a guest. Like someone who had every right to be there. He stepped aside to let her in. No introduction. No explanation. She walked past him, past me into my home. And for a second, I thought, no, I hoped, that maybe this was some kind of misunderstanding. A colleague, a neighbor, someone who needed help, anything that would make sense of what I was seeing. But then she placed her hand lightly on his arm, and he didn't move away. We stood there in silence for a few seconds, the kind of silence that stretches longer than it should. I finally spoke. "Who is she?" My voice sounded calm. Too calm. He looked at me, then at her, then back at me. "This is Claire," he said. "Just a name. No context. No apology. No hesitation. Claire." She gave me a small nod. Not a smile. Just enough acknowledgement to suggest she understood exactly who I was, and exactly what she was doing there. I waited. For something more. An explanation. A correction. A sentence that would pull everything back into place. It didn't come. Instead, he said, "She'll be staying tonight." Just like that. Simple. Final. As if he were telling me we'd run out of milk. I looked at him. At the man I had spent more than 4 decades with. At the man whose habits I knew better than my own. And in that moment, I realized something I should have understood long before. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't a mistake. This had been decided. Planned. Carried out. Slowly. Quietly. Until it reached this exact point. I glanced at the table. At the 3 plates. At the candles burning steadily. At the food I had spent hours preparing. Then back at him. "And where am I supposed to be?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. He rubbed the back of his neck. A gesture I had seen 1,000 times before. Usually when he was uncomfortable. But this time, it felt different. Not guilt. Not hesitation. Just inconvenience. "I think it would be better if you stayed somewhere else tonight," he said. Better. That word again. Always so soft. So harmless. So completely empty. Claire didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. I nodded. Slowly. Not because I agreed. But because there was nothing left to argue. Not in that moment. Not with someone who had already made his decision. I turned away, walked into the bedroom, closed the door behind me, and stood there, still, listening. I could hear them in the other room. Their voices low, comfortable, familiar, as if I were the one who didn't belong. I didn't pack much. I didn't think about what I needed, or where I was going. I just reached for my coat, my gloves, my boots, the thick winter ones I had bought years ago, after he insisted we needed something warmer for the snow. I put them on slowly, methodically, like I had all the time in the world. When I opened the bedroom door again, they both looked up. He didn't say anything. Neither did she. I walked past them, stopped for just a second near the table, looked at the candles one last time. Then I blew them out, one by one. The cold hit me immediately when I stepped outside. Sharp, unforgiving, the kind that steals your breath before you even realize it. Snow covered everything. The driveway, the steps, the street. It was quiet. Too quiet. I pulled my coat tighter around me, adjusted my scarf, and walked. I didn't look back. Not once. I don't know how long I walked. Time feels different when you don't have a destination. When every step is just away. Away from something you can't return to. Away from a life that ended without warning. Or maybe, without acknowledgement. Eventually, I found a bench, half covered in snow, under a streetlight that flickered slightly in the wind. I brushed it off with my hand, sat down, and let the silence settle around me. That's when I saw him. At first, he was just a shape, a figure at the edge of the light. Still, unmoving. Then he stepped closer, and I noticed his feet. Bare. Completely bare against the snow. His skin was pale, almost blue. He was shaking, not violently, but enough. Enough that you could tell he wouldn't last long out there. I watched him for a few seconds, long enough to understand the situation, long enough to realize I wasn't the only one who had nowhere to go that night. I looked down at my boots, then back at him. There was no hesitation, no calculation, no thought of what would happen next. I bent down, untied them, slipped them off, and held them out to him. "Take these," I said. My voice was steady, calm, like I was offering something small, something replaceable. He looked at me, surprised, confused. "You'll freeze," he said. I shook my head. "I'll manage." He hesitated for a moment, then took them, slowly, carefully, as if they were something fragile, something he didn't quite believe was his to accept. And as he put them on, I felt the cold creep in immediately, through my socks, into my skin, up my legs, sharp, relentless. But I didn't move. I just sat there, watching him, as he stood up straighter, as the shaking eased, just a little. That was the moment everything should have ended. A simple exchange, A small act of kindness between two strangers on a cold night. Nothing more. Nothing less. But what happened next was something I never could have imagined. And it started with the sound of engines in the distance. The sound came low at first. Distant. Almost easy to ignore. I thought it was just another car passing somewhere far down the road. Christmas Eve wasn't completely silent, even in the snow. There were always people rushing somewhere. Late dinners. Last-minute visits. Places to be. But this sound didn't fade. It grew. Slowly. Steadily. I lifted my head and looked toward the street. The man was still in front of me, adjusting the boots, stamping his feet lightly against the snow as if testing whether they were real, whether they would hold. The engine noise deepened, then multiplied. One became two. Two became many. Headlights appeared through the snowfall, blurred at first, like distant stars. Then sharper, brighter, closer. I narrowed my eyes. Something wasn't right. Cars don't travel like that. Not in a line. Not that close together. Not that deliberate. The man turned his head slightly, as if he heard it. Two. But he didn't seem surprised. That was the first thing I noticed. He didn't react the way someone would if a convoy of vehicles suddenly approached out of nowhere. He just watched. Calm. Still. The first SUV came into full view as it turned onto the street. Black. Clean. Too clean for a night like this. Its tires moved slowly over the snow, controlled, precise, like the driver knew exactly where to go. Then another followed. And another. Until the entire street began to fill. One by one, they lined up along the curb. Engines running. Lights cutting through the falling snow. 17 of them. I didn't count at first. I just felt the weight of them. The presence. The kind that presses against your chest without touching you. I stayed where I was. I didn't stand. Didn't step back. Didn't ask questions. Because something inside me had already shifted earlier that night. After you lose everything in one moment, the next moment doesn't feel as frightening as it should. It just feels distant. The doors opened almost at the same time. Men stepped out, dressed in dark coats. Sharp. Structured. Not bulky like winter jackets. Tailored. Intentional. They moved quickly, but not in a rush. Purposeful. Each one taking position without speaking. Without looking around. Without hesitation. Snow gathered on their shoulders, but they didn't brush it off. They didn't seem to feel it. I glanced at the man in front of me. I watched closely. Something in my chest tightened, not with fear, but with recognition. Not of the man himself, but of the way the air changed around him. The way everything seemed to adjust. He stopped in front of the man. Looked down at the boots. My boots. Snow still clinging to the edges. Then he looked up, straight into the man's face. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then the older man gave a small nod. Respectful. Subtle. But real. Sir, one of the men behind him said quietly. The word didn't echo. It didn't need to. It landed exactly where it was meant to. Sir. I felt it settle into the silence around us. The man in front of me, the one I had given my boots to, turned slightly. Just enough to look back at me. His expression had changed. Not dramatically. Not in a way most people would notice. But I did. Because I had been watching him when no one else was. The confusion was gone. The hesitation too. What remained was something quieter. Something clearer. He stepped forward. Not away from me. But not exactly toward me either. Just into his place. Into whatever this was. The older man leaned in slightly, speaking to him in a low voice I couldn't hear. A few words. Nothing more. The man nodded once. Then the older man stepped back. No one had acknowledged me yet. Not directly. Not a single question. Not a single glance that lingered too long. And somehow, that felt more important than anything else. Because it meant something very simple. They weren't here by accident. The cold had reached my feet by then. Sharp. Almost burning. I could feel the snow soaking through the thin fabric of my socks. But I didn't move. Didn't pull my legs in. Didn't stand. I just sat there. Watching. Waiting. Not for answers. But for understanding. The man turned back to me fully this time. The one wearing my boots. Snow fell softly around him, catching in his hair, settling on his shoulders. For a moment, he looked exactly the same as before. Just a man in the cold. Just someone trying to survive the night. But the way the others stood behind him, the way they waited, the way the air seemed to hold still, told a different story. He took a step toward me. Slow. Measured. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Just certain. And when he finally spoke, his voice was calm. Low. Steady. As if everything that had just happened Everything that was about to happen had already been decided long before I ever sat down on that bench. "You shouldn't be out here without shoes," he said. It was such a simple sentence. So ordinary that for a second, I almost laughed. Because it sounded like something anyone would say. Something kind. Something small. But there was something beneath it. Something I couldn't quite place yet. Not in the words, but in the way he said them. I looked at him. At the boots. At the line of black SUVs behind him. At the men standing in silence, waiting. And for the first time that night, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to think before. Maybe I hadn't just helped a stranger. Maybe I hadn't just helped a stranger. The thought didn't come all at once. It formed slowly, piece by piece, like something settling into place after being shaken loose. I looked at him again, at the way he stood, at the way the others, those men in dark coats, kept a careful distance behind him. Not too close, not too far. Waiting, not guarding, waiting. There's a difference. "You shouldn't be out here without shoes," he said again, softer this time. As if the first sentence hadn't quite reached me. Or maybe, as if he knew I was still catching up. I glanced down at my feet. The thin fabric of my socks was already soaked through. Snow clung to the edges. My toes had gone numb a while ago. The kind of numb that doesn't feel like pain anymore. Just absence. "I'll be all right," I said. My voice came out steady. It surprised me a little. Because just a few hours earlier, I had been standing in my own home, being told I didn't belong there anymore. And now I was sitting barefoot in the snow, talking to a man surrounded by 17 black SUVs. Life doesn't always change gradually. Sometimes it just shifts. All at once. He studied me for a moment. Not in a way that felt intrusive. Not like he was trying to figure me out. More like he was confirming something. Something he already suspected. "Where were you going?" he asked. I almost smiled. It wasn't a question I had an answer to. "I was walking," I said. That was the truth. I hadn't been going anywhere. I had just been leaving. He nodded once. As if that made sense. As if he understood that sometimes, walking away is the only direction you have. Behind him, one of the men shifted slightly. Just enough to catch his attention. A silent signal. The kind that doesn't need words. The man in front of me didn't turn. He didn't even look back. But he acknowledged it. I could see it in the slight change of his posture. "I need you to tell me something," he said. His tone didn't change. Still calm. Still measured. But there was something new underneath it. "Focus. Why did you give me your boots?" he asked. It was such a simple question. But it didn't feel simple. Not the way he asked it. Not the way everyone else seemed to be listening without looking like they were listening. I thought about it. Not for long. Because the truth wasn't complicated. "I saw you were cold," I said. That's all. There was no challenge in his voice. Just curiosity. I nodded. That's all. He held my gaze for a few seconds. Long enough that I almost looked away. But I didn't. Because something in me had already changed tonight. I wasn't trying to explain myself anymore. I wasn't trying to be understood. I was just answering. I didn't have much left, I added after a moment. The words came quietly, almost without permission. But I had those. Silence settled between us again. Not uncomfortable. Not tense. Just present. The snow kept falling. Soft. Steady. Covering the ground again, even where it had just been disturbed. Erasing footprints. Smoothing everything over. He looked down briefly. At the boots. Then back at me. And for the first time, there was something in his expression I hadn't seen before. Not surprise. Not gratitude. Something deeper. Recognition. "You gave away the last thing you had," he said. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He exhaled slowly. A faint cloud of breath forming in the cold air. Then he turned slightly, just enough this time to acknowledge the people behind him. That was all it took. The subtle shift. The silent permission. Two of the men stepped forward. Not toward me, but closer. Closing the distance just enough to change the shape of the moment. I felt it then. Not fear. Not exactly. But awareness. A quiet understanding that whatever this was, it wasn't random. It wasn't coincidence. And it definitely wasn't over. "You've been out here long?" he asked. "A while," I said. He nodded again. Always that small nod. Like he was collecting details. Placing them somewhere. Another pause. Then, "We can't leave you here," he said. I almost laughed again. Not because it was funny, but because of the timing. Because just hours ago, someone else had decided I didn't belong somewhere. And now, this man, who had been barefoot in the snow just minutes ago, was deciding I shouldn't be left out here. I'll manage, I said. The same words I had used before. Out of habit. Out of instinct. Out of pride, maybe. This time, he didn't accept it. You already did, he replied. A slight pause. Now it's our turn. I didn't respond. Because I didn't know how. Because I wasn't used to that kind of sentence. Not anymore. Behind him, one of the SUVs idled softly. The headlights reflected off the falling snow, turning everything a pale, shifting white. For a second, the world felt suspended, like it was waiting for something. He took another step closer. Not enough to invade my space. Just enough to make his next words clear. You trusted a stranger tonight, he said. His voice was still calm, but there was something firm beneath it now. Most people wouldn't. I looked at him. Really looked this time. Past the coat. Past the posture. Past the quiet control. Trying to find the man I had seen earlier. The one standing barefoot in the snow. I didn't think about it, I said. That's exactly why it matters, he replied. Another silence. Shorter this time. Sharper. Then he straightened slightly, and everything behind him seemed to adjust again, like pieces falling into place. Come with us, he said. 3 words. Simple. Direct. Final. I looked at him. At the line of black SUVs. At the men waiting without speaking. At the boots still on his feet. And for the first time that night, I hesitated. Because something deep inside me, the part that had just been thrown out into the cold, the part that had nothing left to hold on to, was starting to understand something else. This night wasn't over yet. I didn't answer him right away. Come with us. The words stayed in the air between us. Simple, calm, but heavy in a way I couldn't ignore. A few hours earlier, I had been told to leave my own home. Now, a stranger, no, not a stranger anymore, not exactly, was asking me to go somewhere else. Different place. Same unknown. I looked down at my feet again. The cold had settled deeper now. Not sharp anymore. Just there. Like something that had decided to stay. I don't even know who you are, I said. My voice was quiet. Not defensive. Just honest. He didn't seem offended. Didn't rush to explain. Didn't list titles or names or anything that would make this easier to understand. Instead, he said, that's fair. A small pause. Then let's start with something simple. He stepped back slightly. Just enough to create space. Not distance. Space. My name is Daniel, he said. No last name. No introduction beyond that. Just Daniel. I nodded. I'm Margaret, I replied. It felt strange, saying my name out loud like that. As if I were introducing myself to my own life again. Margaret, he repeated. Not testing it. Not questioning it. Just acknowledging it. Behind him, the men remained still. No impatience. No pressure. They weren't trying to convince me. They were waiting. That mattered more than anything else. Because people who rush you usually need something from you. People who wait already know what they're offering. I looked past him. At the SUVs. At the quiet order of everything. No chaos. No confusion. Everything placed exactly where it needed to be. You asked me why I gave you the boots, I said slowly. He nodded. Yes. I didn't do it because I trusted you, I continued. The words came easier now. Clearer. I did it because I didn't have a reason not to. He held my gaze. Listening. Not interrupting. You were cold, I said. That was enough. Another silence. But this one felt different. Less like a pause. More like agreement. That's rare, he said. I almost shook my head. But I didn't. Because I understood what he meant. Even if I didn't want to admit it. The world had changed in ways I hadn't noticed until that night. Or maybe I had noticed and just chose not to see it. Where would I be going? I asked. This time, he answered directly. Somewhere warm. A slight pause. Somewhere safe. Safe. That word felt unfamiliar. Not because I had never been safe, but because I hadn't thought about it in a long time. And after that, I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced briefly toward one of the SUVs. Then back at me. That depends on you, he said. I studied his face, looking for hesitation, for uncertainty, for anything that suggested this was a mistake. I didn't find it. What happens if I say no? I asked. Another simple question. Another honest one. He didn't react. Didn't try to persuade me. Didn't lean in or change his tone. Then we leave, he said. Just like that. No pressure. No consequence. No hidden edge. And you stay here, he added. Not cold. Not harsh. Just factual. I looked down at the snow again. At the faint outline where my boots had been. at the way the ground had already started to cover over the space, like nothing had ever been there. That's what life does sometimes. Erases things quietly, without asking. I thought about the house, about the table, about the candles I had blown out one by one, about the man who hadn't stopped me from leaving. And for the first time since I stepped outside, I felt something clear. Not pain, not anger, something simpler. There was nothing left for me to go back to. I exhaled slowly, the air leaving my lungs in a soft cloud. Then I looked up at him again. Why 17? I asked. It wasn't the question he expected. I could tell. The SUVs, I added. There are 17 of them. A faint shift in his expression. Not surprise. Not quite. But close. Does that matter? He asked. I shrugged slightly. As much as anything else tonight. For a second, just a second, something almost like a smile touched his face. Not fully. Just enough to change the line of it. It wasn't planned, he said. I waited. They came because I didn't return when I was supposed to, he continued. That was it. No further explanation. No detail about who they were, or why it mattered. But it told me enough. Whoever he was, people were looking for him. People who had resources. People who moved quickly. And somehow, for a brief moment, he had been alone, barefoot, in the snow. I didn't ask more, because I understood something else now. This wasn't about who he was. Not yet. It was about what I was going to do next. He took a step back again, giving me room, letting the decision be mine. Margaret, he said. Calm. Steady. Yes. I replied. Come with us. The same words. But this time, they felt different. Not like an offer. Not like a question. Like a door. And I realized I was the only one who could decide whether to walk through it. I didn't move right away. Come with us. The words stayed there. Open. Waiting. I looked past him one more time. At the line of black SUVs. At the men standing in silence. At the snow still falling, soft and steady, covering everything equally. It didn't feel chaotic. It didn't feel dangerous. It felt controlled. A few hours ago, my life had been decided for me. Quietly. Without discussion. Without warning. Now, I was being asked to decide something for myself. I placed my hands on the bench and pushed myself up slowly. My legs felt stiff. Not just from the cold. From everything. For a second, the world tilted slightly. Not enough to fall. Just enough to remind me. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't sat like this in years. I hadn't been outside of my own life like this. I steadied myself. He didn't reach out. He didn't try to help. He just watched, giving me the space to stand on my own. That mattered. More than any offer. I won't stay long, I said. It wasn't a condition. It wasn't a negotiation. Just something I needed to say out loud. He nodded. That's up to you. Simple. Again, everything about him was simple. But nothing about this situation was. I took one step forward. The snow pressed cold against my feet immediately. Sharp this time. Awake. Then another step. Closer to him. Closer to whatever this was. He turned slightly, gesturing toward one of the SUVs. The one in the middle. The one that had gone quiet first. The door was already open. Someone had moved without me noticing. Prepared. Waiting. I paused for a moment. Right before stepping in. Not because I was afraid, but because I realized something. This was the first time in years that I was stepping into something unknown. By choice. I got in. The warmth hit me instantly. Soft. Surrounding. It didn't rush. It didn't overwhelm. It just existed. The seat beneath me was firm, comfortable. The kind of comfort you don't question, because it doesn't ask anything from you. The door closed quietly behind me. Not a slam. Not a click. Just closed. For a second, I just sat there. Hands resting in my lap. Feet still cold, even in the warmth. Then I noticed something. A folded blanket beside me. Clean. Thick. Placed carefully. Not thrown. Not rushed. I looked at it. Then at the man sitting across from me. One of the men in dark coats. He didn't speak. Didn't gesture. Didn't explain. He just inclined his head slightly. A small acknowledgement. As if to say, it's for you. I picked it up. Slowly. Wrapped it around my shoulders. Then around my legs. The warmth settled in gradually. Not immediate. But steady. I didn't say thank you. Not because I wasn't grateful. But because it felt understood. A moment later, the door on the other side opened. Daniel stepped in. Still wearing my boots. He sat across from me. Not too close. Not too far. The door closed. And just like that, the outside world disappeared. No more wind. No more snow. No more cold pressing against my skin. Just silence. warmth, and the quiet hum of the engine. The vehicle began to move. Slowly at first, then smoothly. I didn't look out the window right away. I didn't need to, because I knew something already. I wasn't going back. Not to the house. Not to the table. Not to the life I had just left behind. Are you comfortable? He asked. I nodded once. Yes. Another pause. You didn't ask where we're going, he said. I asked enough, I replied. He studied me again. That same quiet observation. You're not curious? He asked. I considered that. I am, I said. A small pause. But not in a hurry. That seemed to satisfy him. Outside, the line of SUVs moved with us. I could feel it more than see it. The rhythm. The coordination. No one rushed. No one cut ahead. Everything stayed in place. Like this had happened before. Many times. I adjusted the blanket slightly. My hands had started to warm. The numbness slowly giving way to sensation again. It hurt a little. That part always does. When feeling comes back. I didn't react. Just let it happen. After a few minutes, I finally turned my head and looked out the window. The streetlights passed slowly. The snow still falling, softer now. Quieter. We weren't heading toward my neighborhood anymore. That much was clear. We were moving away from everything familiar. Daniel, I said. Yes. I looked at him. At the calm in his expression. At the certainty. You said it depends on me. What happens next? I did. What does that mean? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back slightly. Not avoiding the question. Just placing it where it belonged. It means, he said slowly, tonight doesn't define the rest of your life. I listened. It only shows you where you don't belong anymore. The words settled quietly, deep, and where I do belong. I asked. He met my eyes. Steady. That, he said, is something you get to decide now. I didn't respond, because for the first time in a long time, that answer didn't feel impossible. The car continued forward, through the snow, through the night, and somewhere between the silence and the warmth, between what I had lost and what I didn't understand yet, I realized something else. This wasn't just an escape. It was a beginning. The road stretched quietly ahead. I didn't ask how far we were going. I didn't check the time. For once, I let the moment exist without measuring it. The warmth inside the car had settled into my bones now. Not completely, but enough. Enough that I could feel my fingers again. Enough that the sharp edge of the cold had softened into something distant. I kept the blanket wrapped around me. Not tightly. Just enough to remind myself I wasn't outside anymore. Across from me, Daniel hadn't moved much. Same posture. Same calm. As if motion was something he used only when necessary. I watched him for a moment. Not openly. Just quietly. The way you observe something you don't understand yet. You're not what I expected, I said. The words slipped out before I could stop them. He didn't seem surprised. Most people say that, he replied. I almost smiled. But I didn't. I thought. I paused. Then shook my head slightly. It doesn't matter. It does, he said. I looked up. What did you expect, he asked. I considered the question. Carefully. Someone who would explain everything, I said. A small silence followed. And you're not disappointed? He asked. I thought about that. Then answered honestly. No, because the truth was, I wasn't looking for explanations anymore. Not tonight. Explanations come with reasons. And reasons don't always make things easier. Sometimes they just make the pain clearer. The car slowed slightly. I felt it before I saw anything. A shift in movement. A change in rhythm. I turned toward the window again. The street had changed. Wider. Quieter. The houses larger. Further apart. Then the gates appeared. Tall. Black. Closed. We didn't stop. The gates opened before we reached them. Slowly. Smoothly. Like they had been expecting us. I watched them part. Without a sound. We passed through. And just like that, the outside world felt even further away. The road beyond the gates curved gently, lined with trees. Snow resting quietly on every branch. Lights appeared ahead. Soft at first. Then clearer. A house. No, not just a house. Something larger. Wider. Still. Not loud. Not excessive. Just certain. The car came to a stop. For a moment, no one moved. Then the door beside me opened. The same man as before. Quiet. Precise. He stepped back slightly, giving me space. I looked at Daniel. We're here. I asked. For now, he said. That answer again. Not final. Not fixed. Just enough. I shifted forward. Pulled the blanket slightly tighter around my shoulders. Then placed one foot down. The ground was cold. but not like before. The snow here had been cleared, the surface beneath it solid. Steady. I stepped out fully. The air was still cold, but it didn't cut the same way. Not with walls nearby, not with light surrounding me. I stood there for a second, looking up. The house stretched across the front of me, windows glowing softly, warm light behind every pane. It didn't feel like a place meant to impress. It felt like a place that didn't need to. The others moved around us quietly, doors closing, engines turning off one by one. 17 SUVs. Now silent. The night settled again. Daniel stepped out behind me, still wearing my boots. For a brief moment, I noticed it again. That small detail. Something so simple. But somehow it stayed with me. He walked past me slightly, then stopped, turning just enough to face the house. Come, he said. Not an order. Not a request. Just a direction. I followed. The steps were wide. Stone. Cleared of snow. Each step felt intentional. Like crossing something. Not just distance. The door opened before we reached it. No knock. No hesitation. Someone inside had been watching. Warm air spilled out immediately. Soft. Inviting. I stepped inside. And for a moment, I didn't move. Because the difference hit me all at once. Outside, cold, silence, emptiness. Inside, warmth, light, presence. Not loud. Not overwhelming. Just there. I stood at the entrance. Snow melting slowly from the edges of my socks. A woman approached. Middle-aged. Calm. Composed. She didn't ask questions. Didn't look confused. She simply said, "This way," and turned. I looked at Daniel. He gave a small nod. That was enough. I followed her. Down a hallway. Soft carpet beneath my feet. Warmth rising through the floor. She opened a door. "A room has been prepared," she said. Prepared. The word lingered. I stepped inside. The room was simple, clean, warm. A bed, a chair, a small lamp glowing softly. Nothing excessive, nothing unnecessary, just enough. I stood there quietly, taking it in. "You can rest here," she added. Then she paused. "And there are clothes in the closet." I turned slightly. "Thank you," I said. She nodded once, then left, closing the door behind her. Silence again, but not the same silence as before. This one felt held. I walked slowly toward the bed, sat down. The softness beneath me felt unfamiliar. Not because I hadn't known comfort, but because I hadn't felt it like this in a long time. Without tension, without expectation, just quiet. I looked down at my hands, at the faint redness from the cold, then at the room around me. And for the first time since the door closed behind me earlier that night, I allowed myself to stop. Not think, not question, not understand. Just be. Because something inside me already knew. This place wasn't just where I had arrived. It was where something else was about to begin. I didn't lie down right away. The bed was there. Warm. Still. Untouched. But I stayed sitting at the edge for a while. There's something about unfamiliar comfort. It takes time. Not because it's uncomfortable, but because your body doesn't trust it yet. I rested my hands on my knees. Looked around the room again. Nothing had changed. Everything was exactly where it had been a few minutes ago. But something inside me had. I stood up slowly. Walked toward the closet. Opened it. Inside, neatly folded clothes. Simple. Neutral colors. Soft fabrics. Not new in a flashy way. Not expensive in an obvious way. Just chosen carefully. I ran my fingers lightly over one of the sweaters. Warm. Thick. For a second, I hesitated. Not because I didn't want them, but because I wasn't used to taking things that had been prepared for me. Not without explanation. Not without reason. Then I remembered something. "You already did. Now it's our turn." His words. I exhaled slowly, then reached in. I changed quietly. The fabric felt different against my skin. Dry, warm, comfortable in a way that didn't ask anything in return. I folded my old clothes carefully, even the damp socks. Placed them neatly on the chair. Old habits. They stay with you, even when everything else changes. When I was done, I stood there for a moment. Then I sat on the bed again. This time, I leaned back, just slightly. The mattress gave gently beneath me, supporting, not sinking. I closed my eyes, not to sleep, just to pause. And for a brief moment, everything went quiet. No voices, no cold, no questions, just stillness. A soft knock broke it. I opened my eyes, sat up. "Come in," I said. The door opened slowly. It was Daniel, still calm, still composed, still wearing my boots. That detail. Again. It didn't leave. He stepped inside, closed the door behind him. I wanted to check on you, he said. I nodded. I'm fine. He looked at me for a moment. Not questioning. Not doubting. Just confirming. You look warmer, he said. I am. A small pause. Then he glanced toward the chair. At the folded clothes. At the damp ones beside them. You didn't throw them away, he said. I followed his gaze. No, I replied. Why not? Simple question. Again. They're still mine, I said. He held that for a second, then nodded. I understand. Silence settled between us again. But it wasn't empty. It felt intentional. You haven't asked anything about this place, he said. I noticed, I replied. And I looked at him. If I needed to know, you would have told me already. Another pause. This one slightly different. He shifted his weight just a little. That's true, he said. I didn't press further, because something about that answer felt complete. He walked a few steps into the room. Not invading. Just closer. You can stay here as long as you need, he said. The sentence was simple, but it carried something else. Not obligation. Not expectation. Permission. I don't know how long that is, I said. That's all right, he replied. I studied his face again. You're used to people needing something from you, I said. It wasn't a question. He didn't answer immediately. Then yes. Do you need something from me? I asked. He shook his head. No, another pause. Then he added. But I think you needed something tonight. I didn't respond right away, because he was right. I just hadn't put it into words yet. I needed to leave, I said. He nodded. And you did. Simple. No praise. No sympathy. Just acknowledgement. I looked down at my hands. They made it easy, I said quietly. He didn't ask who. He didn't need to. Sometimes people show you exactly where you don't belong, he said. I looked up. That doesn't mean you were the one who didn't fit. The words landed deeper than I expected. I held them there. Didn't rush to respond. Because for the first time, that idea didn't feel impossible. Outside, somewhere in the distance, I could hear a door close. A faint sound. Then silence again. Everything here moved quietly. No sudden noise. No interruptions. Just control. You should rest, he said. I nodded. But I didn't lie down yet. Daniel, I said. He paused near the door. Yes. I looked at him. At the man who had been barefoot in the snow. At the man who now stood in a warm room, surrounded by things I didn't understand yet. Why were you out there? The question finally came. He didn't answer right away. For the first time, there was a shift. Small, but real. Not discomfort. Not avoidance. Consideration. Then he said, because sometimes it's the only way to see who people really are. I held his gaze. And what did you see? I asked. A brief pause. Then you. Just one word. Nothing more. He opened the door, stepped out, and closed it quietly behind him. I sat there. Still. The room felt different now. Not because anything had changed, but because something had been revealed. Not about him. About me. I lay back slowly, pulled the blanket over myself. And as I closed my eyes this time, one thought stayed with me. That night, I didn't just lose a home. I was seen. I didn't fall asleep right away. My eyes were closed. My body was still. But my mind wasn't. You. The word stayed with me. Simple. Direct. Unavoidable. Because it wasn't praise. It wasn't admiration. It was something else. Recognition. I turned slightly on the bed. The blanket shifted softly with me. Warm. Light. Nothing like the cold from earlier. Just a few hours ago, I had been sitting on a wooden bench, my feet numb, the snow pressing through my socks. Now, I was lying in a quiet room, wrapped in warmth, surrounded by things I didn't ask for. Life doesn't always move in steps. Sometimes it jumps. I opened my eyes. The room was dim now, the lamp still on, soft light resting against the walls. I listened. No voices. No movement. Just the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. I sat up slowly. Sleep wasn't coming. Not yet. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, placed my feet gently on the floor. Warm. That alone felt unfamiliar. I stood, walked toward the window. The glass was clear. No frost. No fog. Outside, the snow was still falling, but softer now. Thinner. The line of SUVs was gone. The driveway was empty. Clean. As if nothing had ever happened. But I knew better. I rested my hand lightly against the window. Not pressing. Just there. For a moment, I thought about the house. The one I had left behind. The table. The candles. The chair I used to sit in. And then, The way he looked at her. Not me. I didn't feel anger. That surprised me. Not sadness either. Just distance. Like I was remembering something that had already ended long before tonight. I stepped back from the window, turned slowly, looked at the room again. Everything here felt intentional. Nothing excessive. Nothing missing. Just enough. That word again. A soft knock interrupted the silence. I turned toward the door. Come in, I said. The door opened. The same woman from earlier. Calm. Composed. You're still awake, she said. I couldn't sleep, I replied. She nodded, as if she expected that. That's normal, she said. She stepped inside, carrying something. A tray. She set it gently on the small table near the bed. Tea, she said, and something warm to eat. I looked at it. Simple. Soup. Bread. Nothing complicated. But the smell. It filled the room quietly. I hadn't realized how hungry I was. Thank you, I said. She gave a small nod. You should eat, she added. I moved closer. Sat down again. The bowl was warm in my hands. I didn't rush. Just took a small spoonful. The heat spread slowly. Not just through my body. Through something deeper. I ate in silence. She didn't leave right away. She stood near the door. Not watching. Not waiting. Just there. What is this place? I asked finally. The question came out softer than I expected. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at me. Carefully. This is a place where people come when they need time, she said. Time. I repeated that in my mind. To decide. I asked. She nodded. Yes. I looked down at the bowl again. And him. I asked. She understood who I meant. Her expression didn't change. He doesn't bring people here often, she said. That was it. No explanation. No details. But it was enough. Because it told me something important. This wasn't random. I finished eating. Slowly. Placed the spoon down. Thank you, I said again. She inclined her head slightly. Then moved toward the door. Before she left, she paused. You're safe here, she said. Then she was gone. The door closed softly behind her. Safe. That word again. I sat there for a while. Not thinking. Not analyzing. Just letting everything settle. Then I stood. Walked back to the bed. This time, I didn't hesitate. I lay down. Pulled the blanket over me. Closed my eyes. And slowly, the weight of the night began to shift. Not disappear. Just move. From something sharp to something quiet. And as sleep finally came, one thought stayed with me. Not about the house. Not about my husband. But about something else entirely. For the first time in years. No one was asking me to stay. And yet, I didn't want to leave. I woke up slowly. Not the kind of waking where you open your eyes all at once. This was quieter. Gentler. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was. The bed felt unfamiliar. Too soft. Too still. Then I noticed the warmth. Not just around me. Inside the room. Inside my body. And then it came back. The snow. The bench. The boots. The SUVs. I opened my eyes. The light had changed. Morning. Soft sunlight filtered through the curtains. Pale. Quiet. I didn't move right away. I just lay there. Looking at the ceiling. Waiting for something. A feeling. A weight. A regret. But none of it came the way I expected. No sharp pain. No panic. Just clarity. I sat up slowly. The blanket slipped slightly from my shoulders. For a second, I held on to it. Not because I needed it, but because it felt grounding. I looked around the room again. Nothing had changed. Everything still in its place. Calm. Orderly. Like the night before hadn't been chaos. Just a transition. I stood up. Walked to the window. Pulled the curtain aside. The snow had stopped. The ground was covered. Smooth. Unbroken. No footprints. No tracks. As if the world had been reset. I watched it for a moment. Then I let the curtain fall back into place. There was a quiet knock on the door. Come in, I said. The door opened. The same woman. Calm. Composed. Good morning, she said. Good morning, I replied. Her eyes moved briefly across the room, taking in everything. Not checking. Not inspecting. Just noticing. Did you rest? She asked. Yes, I said. And it was true. Not deeply. Not completely. But enough. There's breakfast downstairs, she said. I nodded. Thank you. She stepped aside slightly, leaving the door open. An invitation. Not a command. I changed quickly. The clothes from last night still warm. Still comfortable. I paused for a second before leaving the room. Just long enough to look back. At the bed. The chair. The folded clothes I had left. Everything exactly where I had placed it. That mattered. Then I stepped out. The hallway was quiet. Soft light. Muted colors. Nothing loud. Nothing rushed. I followed the direction she had gone. Down the hallway. Around a corner. Until I reached a staircase. I moved carefully. Not because it was unfamiliar, but because I wasn't in a hurry. At the bottom, a wide space opened up. A living area. Large, but not overwhelming. Warm tones. Natural light. And in the center, a table. Set. Not for many. Just a few. He was already there. Daniel. Sitting quietly. A cup in his hand. Still wearing my boots. That detail again. It made me pause. He looked up as I approached. "Good morning, Margaret," he said. "Good morning," I replied. I took a seat across from him. There was no rush to speak. The silence wasn't awkward. Just shared. I noticed the food on the table. Simple. Warm. Just like last night. I reached for a cup. Poured some tea. My hands were steady now. "You slept," he said. "I did." He nodded. "That's good." A small pause. Then, "I wasn't sure you would stay." I looked at him. "I wasn't sure either," I said. That was the truth. He seemed to accept that. No surprise. Just understanding. I took a sip of the tea. Warm. Familiar. "You still haven't asked," he said. I knew what he meant. "About you?" I asked. He nodded. I set the cup down. "Do I need to know?" I asked. He held my gaze. Eventually, he said, "Not now. Not if you're not ready." I considered that, then shook my head slightly. "I don't think I'm ready for explanations," I said. He leaned back just a little. "That makes sense." Another pause. Then he added, "But you should know one thing." I waited. "You weren't brought here by accident." The words landed quietly. I didn't react right away, because part of me already knew that. "You were seen," he continued. That word again. Seen. Not judged. Not questioned. Seen. I looked down at the table. At the simple setting. The quiet order. "And what does that mean?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached for his cup. Took a slow sip. Then, "It means," he said, "your life doesn't have to go back to what it was." I lifted my eyes to meet his. "And if I wanted to?" I asked. A fair question. He didn't hesitate. "Then we take you back," he said. Simple. Direct. No pressure. No expectation. Just a choice. I sat there, feeling the weight of that. Because for the first time, I wasn't being told where I belonged. I was being asked. And that changed everything. I didn't answer him right away. "Then we take you back." The words were simple. Too simple. Back. I looked down at my hands. Resting on the table. Still. Calm. Just hours ago, those same hands had been shaking in the cold. Now they didn't move at all. "Back to what?" I asked. He didn't respond immediately. Because he knew. He didn't need to explain what back meant. The house. The table. The man who had already replaced me. I let out a slow breath. "I don't think there's anything to go back to," I said. The sentence didn't hurt the way I expected. It didn't break anything. Because something had already broken. Earlier. Quietly. Without asking me. He nodded. Not in agreement. Not in approval. Just acknowledgement. "That's an answer," he said. I picked up the cup again. Took a small sip. Warm. Steady. "What happens if I stay?" I asked. This time, he didn't answer right away. Not because he didn't know. Because he was choosing his words. Carefully. "You don't stay here," he said. I looked up. "This is just a place to pause," he continued. Pause. I repeated that word in my mind. Not a destination. Not a solution. Just a moment in between. "Then what?" I asked. He leaned forward slightly. Not closer. Just more present. "Then you decide what comes next," he said. That answer again. It sounded simple. But it wasn't. Because deciding what comes next means you have to let go of what came before. And that's not something people talk about. I looked around the room. The light. The space. The quiet. Everything here felt controlled. Intentional. Nothing accidental. "Who are you, Daniel?" I asked. The question finally came. Not rushed. Not forced. Just ready. He held my gaze. And for the first time, he didn't answer immediately. There was a pause. Not hesitation. Consideration. "You already know enough," he said. I didn't look away. "That's not an answer," I replied. "No," he said calmly. "It's the only one that matters right now." Another silence. Different this time. Not empty. Measured. I leaned back slightly. "You said I was seen," I said. He nodded. "By who?" He didn't point. Didn't gesture. But I understood. "By you?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not just me. That was all." No names. No details. But it changed something. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about one man. It was about something larger. Something I hadn't stepped into yet. And what do they see? I asked. This time, he answered without pause. Someone who gave away the last thing she had, without asking for anything in return. The words settled quietly. I didn't react. Because I remembered something. I hadn't done it to be seen. I hadn't done it to be rewarded. I had done it because there was no reason not to. That doesn't make me special, I said. He tilted his head slightly. It makes you rare, he replied. I didn't argue. Because part of me understood. Even if I didn't want to. Outside, somewhere beyond the windows, the world continued. But in here, time felt different. Slower. Clearer. What do you want from me? I asked. The question returned. Stronger this time. He didn't hesitate. Nothing. I held his gaze. That's not how things work, I said. It is here, he replied. Simple. Again, everything with him came back to that. No pressure. No demand. Just space. And if I choose to leave? I asked. Then you leave, he said. No resistance. No persuasion. Just permission. I sat there for a long moment, letting everything settle. Because for the first time in years, no one was telling me what I should do. No one was deciding for me. No one was replacing me. I was choosing. Slowly, carefully. I set the cup down. I won't go back, I said. The words came out quiet, but steady. He didn't smile. Didn't react. Just nodded once. All right, he said. That was it. No celebration. No confirmation. Just acceptance. I looked at him. And I won't stay here either, I added. Another pause. Then, that's the point, he said. I almost smiled this time. Because I understood. This place was never meant to keep me. It was meant to show me something. Not about him. Not about the house. But about myself. And as I sat there, in the quiet, in the warmth, I realized something I hadn't thought about all night. Not once. I hadn't asked about my husband. Not where he was. Not what he was doing. Not what would happen next. Because for the first time, it didn't matter. I sat there for a long time after that. Not speaking. Not asking. Just letting the silence settle into something I could understand. I won't go back. I won't stay here either. Those words were still there. Clear. Unshaken. For the first time in years, I had said something about my life without waiting for someone else to agree. Daniel didn't interrupt. He didn't guide the moment. He let it be mine. That, more than anything else, told me something important. This wasn't a place that decided things for you. It was a place that made sure you decided them yourself. What happens now? I asked quietly. He looked at me. Not surprised. Not rushed. Now we make sure you're not left with nothing, he said. I tilted my head slightly. I'm not, I replied. He didn't argue. Instead, he asked, what do you have? The question wasn't harsh, but it was direct. I thought about it. Not emotionally. Not defensively. Just honestly. I have myself, I said. A small pause. And that's enough. He held my gaze. Then nodded. It is, he said. No doubt. No hesitation. Just confirmation. But then he added something else. It doesn't mean you have to start from zero. That made me pause. Because I understood what starting from zero felt like. Cold. Empty. Uncertain. You mean help? I asked. He didn't flinch at the word. If you choose it, he said. There it was again. Choice. Always returning to that. I leaned back slightly in my chair. What kind of help? I asked. He didn't list options. Didn't explain in detail. Instead, he said, the kind that doesn't take anything from you. I almost smiled. That sounds rare, I said. It is, he replied. Another silence. But this one felt lighter. Because something had shifted. Not around me. Inside me. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was deciding. I don't want anything that ties me back to what I left, I said. He nodded. That won't happen. And I don't want to depend on something I don't understand, I continued. Another nod. Then don't, he said. Simple. No argument. No persuasion. Just agreement. I studied him again. You make everything sound easy, I said. It's not easy, he replied. A small pause. It's just clear. That stayed with me. Clear. Not simple. Not easy. Clear. I looked down at the table again. At the empty cup. At the quiet space around us. I built a life once, I said. The words came slowly. I took care of a home, a family, a routine. I paused. And I thought that was everything. He didn't interrupt. Didn't add to it. Just listened. I don't want to build the same thing again, I said. That part came faster. Stronger. He nodded. Then don't, he said. Again. That same answer. And somehow, it didn't feel dismissive. It felt freeing. What would you do? I asked. The question turned. For the first time, I asked about him. He didn't answer right away. Then, I would start with what wasn't taken from me, he said. I held that. Not what was lost. Not what was broken. What remained. I thought about that. About myself. About everything I had just walked away from. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had been emptied. I felt like something had been removed. Something that didn't belong anymore. I think I understand, I said quietly. He nodded. I think you do. We sat in silence again. But this time, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like something was forming. Not rushed. Not forced. Just beginning. After a moment, he stood. I'll have someone bring you what you need, he said. I looked up. And then, I asked. He met my eyes. Then you decide where you go next. I nodded. That answer didn't scare me anymore. Because now, it didn't feel like being left alone. It felt like being trusted. He turned to leave. But before he reached the door, I spoke again. Daniel. He paused. Yes. I looked at him. At the man who had been barefoot in the snow. At the man who had said almost nothing and changed everything. Thank you, I said. He held my gaze for a second, then gave a small nod. You're welcome, Margaret. And then he left. The door closed quietly behind him. I sat there for a while longer, not thinking about the past, not worrying about the future, just sitting in the space between. And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I stayed there a little longer after he left, not because I was unsure, not because I was waiting for something else to happen, but because I wanted to feel the moment completely. The quiet, the space, the absence of pressure. For years, every decision I made had been tied to someone else. A husband, a home, a routine that slowly became a role. And when that role was taken away, I thought I had lost everything. But sitting there, in that still room, I understood something I hadn't seen before. I hadn't lost myself. I had just been set aside. And now, for the first time in a very long time, I was no longer waiting to be chosen. I stood up slowly. The chair moved softly against the floor. A small sound, but it felt real. I walked back to the window, pulled the curtain aside again. The snow had settled completely now. Everything outside looked calm, clean. No signs of last night. No trace of the bench. The cold. The moment, everything changed. But I didn't need to see it anymore. Because I carried it with me. Not as pain. Not as loss. As a turning point. I let the curtain fall back into place. Then I walked out of the room. The hallway felt different this time. Not unfamiliar. Not distant. Just temporary. I moved slowly, taking each step without rushing. Down the stairs, past the quiet spaces, until I reached the front of the house. The door was already open, as if someone knew. Or maybe, as if it had always been open. The cold air met me again. But it didn't feel the same. It didn't cut. It didn't push me back. It just existed. A car was waiting. Not 17 this time. Just one. Simple. Quiet. The driver stood beside it. He didn't say anything. Just opened the door. I paused for a moment. Then I turned slightly. Daniel was there. Standing a few steps behind. Not close. Not distant. Just present. Still wearing my boots. That detail stayed with me until the very end. I suppose this is goodbye, I said. He shook his head slightly. No, he replied. A small pause. This is where you continue. I held his gaze. And for the first time, I allowed myself to smile. Just a little. Then thank you for the pause, I said. He nodded. That's all it was meant to be. I didn't ask for more. I didn't ask where he would go, or what would happen next. Because I understood something clearly now. Not everything in life is meant to be explained. Some things are meant to change you, and then let you go. I turned back toward the car. This time, I didn't hesitate. I stepped in. The door closed softly behind me. As the car began to move, I looked out the window one last time. The house stood still, quiet, unchanged. And Daniel, he didn't wave. He didn't step forward. He just stood there, as if he had always been part of that place, and never meant to leave it. The road stretched ahead. Not familiar, not planned, but open. I rested my hands in my lap. No tension, no urgency, just space. After a while, the driver spoke. Where would you like to go? The question was simple. But this time, it didn't feel overwhelming. It didn't feel like something I had to answer immediately. Because for the first time, I understood something deeply. I didn't need to have the whole path. I just needed the next step. I looked out at the road again, at the world that hadn't changed, but somehow felt completely different. Take me somewhere I can start, I said. The driver nodded. No questions. The car continued forward, and as the distance grew between me and everything I had left behind, I realized something I never expected to feel. Not regret, not sadness, relief. Because that night, on a cold bench, with nothing left, I had given away the last thing I owned. And somehow, I walked away with everything I needed. So if you're listening to my story right now,